So let me just start out, and maybe I could just start with you, Christopher, and then go to you, John and Sue, and ask each of you to introduce yourselves by telling us the name of your organization, your role in the organization, your name, obviously, when your organization was founded, how long you've been with them, and who you serve in your organization, and why you have that particular mission. So you could kind of do a little introduction. I'll pass it on to you, Chris.
Sure, thank you, Lucy. So my name is Christopher Shane. I'm Executive Director of Kirkland Arts Center, which is a visual arts center located on the east side. I've been there since beginning of 2008, so a little over 2 years. The organization was founded in 1962. It's in a historic landmark building, which was built in 1891. And the constituency that it serves are really both Seattle and East Side art students, arts patrons. We have an art gallery as well as art classes for youth and adults from here.
Great, thank you.
My name is Adnan Mahmood. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Joel Kahn Foundation. We're relatively new. We actually just launched in June of 2009. And our target crowd is what we call the next generation of philanthropists. So these are basically people who don't have a lot of money to give, but they want to know where the money is going. So our value add is we show impact for every donation we get. So either a photo, a video, or a story for every donation that we get. So we have projects in over 30 countries now.
Thank you. Sue?
I'm Sue Eastgard. I'm the director of the Youth Suicide Prevention Program. It was an organization I started in 1999, so a little older, but not as old. We're doing prevention education and training with what we call gatekeepers, people who are working with adolescents on the front line or wherever they might be engaging with young people. There you go. Okay.
If you could just talk about for a minute how you happened to come to work with ESC, what you were looking for in terms of assistance, and a little bit of background on that.
Sure. So we came up with the idea about the Joel Kahn Foundation about, 2.5 years ago or so. And I actually have a daytime job at Microsoft. And my wife and I, we wanted to start this organization. And we actually had no idea about how to go around and set up a nonprofit organization. We know what's our service going to be. We knew what's the products we're going to provide to our donors, but we didn't know how to set up a nonprofit organization and the intricacies that's involved. So, me being a tech guy, I naturally went to the internet and searched for consulting services in Seattle, and through my search, I found Institute Services Corp. I sent an email, and I believe Nancy replied to us, and we went in and sat down with her and talked to her about what our needs were, and she found us great consultants.
Thank you. Sue, you want to tell us?
My father was about to retire from his law practice when I got this organization going. So I said, before you retire, you have to get us incorporated. So I didn't use ESC in that role, but it wasn't long after that I realized, and to start the not-for-profit, I'd really asked a lot of my friends and colleagues to serve on my board, and they were done being board members. Not my friends, but maybe some of them are also. But the issue is, did I work them too hard? The first time we got involved with ESC was really to try to help us figure out what's the next iteration in terms of once you abuse and use your friends, well, how do you then sort of grow your organization and look at some job descriptions and expectations of board members. And subsequently, we've used ESC in a strategic planning process, and we have also periodically sort of look at, it just keeps being like leaps, okay, so what's the next step for the organization? So most recently, looking at, how do we live beyond, if I'm going to retire someday, what happens in terms of the mothership and me as the founder, and how do we build some legs and sustainability around that? And ESC has been involved in looking at and helping us with that process. So a number of different settings for which we've grown and gotten help.
So why don't we start with you, Adnan, since you're the newest? You're the newest to inform, and talk about what your organization looks like right
Sure.
now.
Right now, we are all volunteer organization because we're so new. But we have plans for this year to go into paid staff because we just can't keep up with being volunteers. Right.
How many volunteer staff?
There's like over 30.
Wow.
And I'm like the oldest one. so yeah, it's a very young group.
How about you, Chris?
So the Art Center employs 8 people full-time, or not full-time, but 8 people regularly, and then we have some additional part-time help we work with seasonally. In addition, like your organization, we really survive on a significant amount of volunteer help. We have a number of programs which are primarily volunteer run.
About how many volunteers do you have?
Oh, it's several hundred.
Wow.
Sue?
I started in my bedroom doing this in 1999. It was just me. We now have a Seattle office, and there are 2 full-time people and 4 other part-timers. Because we have a statewide mandate, I also have contractors in other parts of the state who provide services basically out of their home. We don't have office space in those other sites. It's very challenging to get volunteers for us in this work. It is not clinical work, so that sometimes people are wanting to help young people or prevent suicide. It's much more about health education and training. We'd use some volunteers, but primarily we don't have many because it is a difficult, awkward niche. It doesn't quite fit for many people about what it is they would be doing. Some people love to come and file, and that's great, but we don't have a whole lot of places that people feel confident in doing volunteer work.
Can you give us some examples of maybe things that consultants do that make you feel that you are valued as a client?
Yeah, some of those things are going to seem really obvious. I mean, I'm looking for a consultant who genuinely is willing to listen to what the issues are, the particular issues in an organization, not assuming that they know because they volunteered or provides consulting services for a different organization. I think everyone has its own culture and its own challenges and strengths. So I think it kind of reminds me of a dating service. I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but you know, there's some, I mean, it just feels like sometimes you get the right date and you kick it off and you enjoy it, and sometimes it's like, this person does not understand me and my, whatever, my story. So I guess I'm really interested in somebody who I can connect with, and I feel, and that comes mostly from, I think, listening, a sense of, I'll be really honest with you, I'm not as concerned. I think the skill set is interesting. I think it's the repartee, the interest, the commitment to, I think where it's been frustrating, and this is not quite what you asked, but that's all right. And that is, you know, I appreciate this is a volunteer consulting role. It's really frustrating to start with a volunteer consultant who then gets a full-time job and says, I'm out of here. And I get it, I get that, but that's really hard when you've just told your story like on a new date and then they tell you they don't want to see you again. So maybe I'm sharing too much, but it just feels, some of that just feels like, you know, if you're going to commit to an organization, then you're going to have to commit to an organization for a period of time and not assume that, I'm sorry, my full-time work is taking me elsewhere. And it's a really big challenge, but from my perspective, it feels important that you're in it for the commitment of time that you initially said you would be in it.
Excellent, thank you. Chris, do you have a?
Sure. I mean, I would totally agree with what you said. I think there's a sense of partnership that you're trying to foster, and if you do spend the time to get the person up to speed on the organizational challenges, the programming issues, the relationships between the different stakeholders, then you're really giving that person some responsibility to manage that information and advise you. And so you absolutely do want, you've invested the time, they've invested the time, you want to see some results. And I think one of the challenges always with consulting is to understand upfront what is the consultant going to provide. They may not do the work. they may provide the advice, and understanding the difference where the advice ends and the work begins. I think it's an important